And now, my last word, for a change, is full of praise for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his delicate handling of the disparate and strategic interests of Russia and Israel in Syria. In contrast to his woeful mismanagement of the Iranian nuclear file, where his threats, theatrics, and boorishly subversive behavior failed to prevent or even significantly improve the terms of the nuclear deal with Tehran, Netanyahu this time around is spearheading a credible campaign to convince Vladimir Putin to rein in his Shiite allies in Syria. He's doing so not through political intimidation and empty threats, tactics that are in any case irrelevant and ineffective with the strong man from Moscow. Rather, he's doing so through sound, sober, and consistent diplomacy, backed up by military action from time to time against high-value arms destined for Hezbollah across the Syrian border in Lebanon. From the very early days of Russia's projection of power into Syria, Netanyahu realized it was a strategic game changer. He quickly went to Moscow in the fall of 2015 to lay out Israel's red lines, its obligation to deny advanced weapons from reaching the Iranian-backed Lebanese organization. And he wisely initiated with Moscow the deconfliction channels that have thus far prevented miscalculation and unintended clashes between Israeli and Russian aircraft operated in the congested skies of Syria. Now, Netanyahu is working to coordinate with Putin Israel's minimum requirements for the prospective day after. If and when the fighting subsides, and if a diplomatic framework is reached for the country we once called Syria, Netanyahu wants to assure that neither Iran nor its Hezbollah proxies will be allowed to open a new front along Israel's northern border. Last week, Netanyahu and his head of military intelligence presented Putin with details attesting to Iranian plans to establish a permanent presence in Syria, including a naval base there. This was not for informational purposes, as Moscow clearly knows what's happening in its area of operations. Rather, Netanyahu was seeking Putin's tacit consent to act against these Iranian sites at a time mutually convenient to both nations. And where does Washington fit into all of this? The very question speaks volumes about the dearth of decisive leadership coming out of Washington. But here again, Netanyahu deserves credit for understanding early on, as we heard from the esteemed experts here in this program, that Putin is the power calling the shots in Syria. We trust that Netanyahu will gain the support of President Trump and the U.S. Congress for actions he deems necessary to secure the vital interests of the Jewish state. And that's my last word. Please join us again next week for a new edition of Strictly Security at I-24 News. And until then, wishing you a safe and pleasant evening from the Jaffa Port.